When most people actually use Ansible on a day-to-day basis, they use Ansible roles as the way to organize their various plays and playbooks. Now, the nice thing about Ansible roles is we are not learning any new functionality or very minimal new functionality. All it is a way to organize your plays and your handlers and all those things so that they're easier to handle. If you remember in the last nugget where we learned how to include files, it got really confusing really quick. What kind of file are you including? Is it a task file? Is it a play file? How it's included, where it's included. So that's really what the idea of roles does. It gives us a folder structure for storing those files, and it also does something cool where it will automatically include files that are named and placed in the proper place. Main.yml, for example, if that is in a tasks folder, those tasks will automatically be run if you execute a role. We're going to look at how that plays out, but it's just important to know that we're not learning any new functionality. We're just learning a new way to organize things so that it's easier to keep track of what we're doing. Also, I want to point out though, since we're starting to use roles now, this is a very common thing where people share roles, and usually the file extension on roles is going to be YML on those YAML files instead of YAML. The YAML extension is very common in Linux because we're not limited to, .3. We're like a dot and then 3 characters, but the convention for the rest of the world is generally .yml. So you can do either one, but if you're sharing roles with other people, you're often going to see just .yml. So if you want to stick with that conventionality for everything you do, that's perfectly fine. Know that either way is okay, but you're going to see this a lot in shared roles. So what does a role actually look like? Well, it's just a folder structure and a bunch of YAML files. And we'll look at that on the command line in a second, but this is kind of a breakdown of a very complicated folder structure that a role could be. Now, the nice thing about roles is you don't have to have every one of these folders inside in order for it to be a fully functional and valid role. If the folder doesn't there, like for example, if we're not doing meta role dependencies or anything like that, which we haven't even talked about because it's a more complicated topic than this course is going to cover. Don't worry, if there's no meta folder, it's not a problem at all. All we're going to do here is break out the various items that we do need and put them in folders. And how it works is your site.yaml file, that's generally the main playbook. Now you can have other playbooks too, like in your folder, and these are going to be things that refer to the various roles that exist inside your roles folder. So you're going to have a roles folder, and inside that folder you're going to have folders that are named for the various roles. For example, this role is called common. Inside this common folder is a tasks folder, and inside that tasks folder is a file called main.yml. Now everything in the file called main.yml is automatically included in any YAML file up here that refers to the common role. Well, again, we're gonna do this on the command line, but it's important to see how the structure works. And so if one of the tasks inside this main.yml file refers to a handler, like it notifies a handler, it's going to automatically look in this main.yml file inside the handlers folder for any handlers that happen to be named that. So you don't have to make an include statement that includes these files. If you're using the role command, it's going to automatically include these main.yml files in each of the individual folders. And what's really cool is you can keep adding things to this role. Like for example, let's say our tasks were to install Apache and start the Apache service. Well, what if we also wanted to create a configuration file based on the individual hosts? Well, we could use a template, and we'd put that in the template file. And so we know how those templates work. We learned about that in an earlier file. Let's say that there's a particular HTML file that we want to copy. Well, if we store it in the files folder, it's going to be automatically accessible to our role as well. So again, it's just a way to organize things so that you don't lose track of what kind of file is this, and is it a task, is it a play, what is going on. It's just organization is all Ansible roles are, but that makes for a very, very powerful system when it comes to doing tasks on enormous rollouts of systems. We're going to do it in our environment, and you're going to see just how simple it is to do. Now I created a roles folder right here on our desktop, and I want to show you the folder structure. So inside roles, I've created one folder called Apache. So we're gonna have the Apache role, and inside that folder there are two folders. There's the tasks folder, which contains a main.yaml file. If we go back over here, there's a handlers file, which also contains a main.yaml file. Now let's look at that. So here's the handlers file. We'll double click on this. It's a YAML file, so it starts with 3 dashes. And these, again, remember, handlers are just tasks that are called differently. So we're going to say this is a handler start Debian service. So if this handler is called, it's going to enable the Apache 2 service on boot, and it's going to make sure that the service is currently running. Same thing down here. If the handler start CentOS service is called, it's going to make sure that the HTTPD service is enabled on boot and currently running. So these are our handlers that are automatically included because it's in the main.yml file inside the handlers folder. So go back to the Apache level. Inside tasks, we have something similar. Again, it starts with 3 dashes. It's a YAML file. And here we have, install Apache 2 on Debian. So again, it uses apt for installing Apache 2. It only does it when it's a Debian class file. And then if it creates a change, it's going to notify the handler start Debian service. But again, the handlers aren't down here. They're in that other main.yaml file inside the handlers folder. Same thing here. CentOS, and it installs it if it's Red Hat, and then it notifies the handler start CentOS service if a change was made. So that's, again, we're not learning anything new apart from where things are stored and that they're automatically called. So here we have, again, roles, Apache, inside the Apache folder, our handlers and tasks, and at the desktop level, we have this site.yaml. Now, if we look at this, this is how simple it is. This is what's great, okay? So we have, again, it starts with 3 dashes. It's a YAML file. What hosts do we want to use? We're going to use the GUI host, which for us means this Ubuntu and this CentOS machine. Become yes. Again, this is just a regular playbook. But then the only thing we need to do is say roles and then say what role we want to apply to these hosts. In our case, Apache, because that's the name of the folder over here. Inside the roles folder is Apache. So we're going to install this role on the GUI hosts. And that's all. There's nothing else that needs to be in here. And it's going to call that and then include all those appropriate files. So how does that work? Well, really, really, really simply. Let's go here. Now I do have to switch to the desktop folder. So ls, you'll see that's what we have here. Roles folder, site.yaml. So I'm just going to say Ansible playbook, site.yaml, and then it's going to look in that folder structure and it's going to do all of the things. Now we've done all these things in various other nuggets, but it pulls them all together based on where they are, what folder they're in, and what tasks and handlers are inside the appropriate folders. So notice I didn't have any include statements anywhere. However, it's including all of those things and it's doing what it needs to do. And since I made this a handler, let's see, it actually didn't do anything on Ubuntu because Ubuntu starts the service and enables it, but this handler, it actually did start it and enable the service, so there was a change there. And up here, I mean, this is exactly what we would expect it to do if we created this really long playbook by hand, but instead, we've broken it up into roles, and inside that role we have a handler folder, a task folder, and remember we could do all the other things, like we could have variables defined inside there, we could have templates, we could have files. All of those things are created with this folder structure and then automatically included inside the site.yaml or whatever playbook you start that references the role. Now it is important though, it has to be in the same folder. So we execute one of these playbooks, and if we reference a role, it's going to look inside this folder, inside the current directory, for a role called whatever it is we look for. For us, it was Apache, but here it would be the role common that would install these various things. So roles are just a way to break things down in an organized fashion. And what's nice about that is since it's a standard, we can use other people's roles to do things on our own computers. It ends up being a really powerful way that the community can come together. But that's for our next nugget. What I really want you to play with, and I do want you to play with it, is work on the folder structure. Okay, see if you can make some changes on how things are referenced, and you create some folders, create a new role. See if you can reference that new role inside a new YAML file like site.yaml, or create another YAML file next to it that references a role. Once you get used to how roles address the different folders and the different main.yaml files inside there, that's where it becomes really, really powerful. Also, I just want to reiterate, keep an eye out for YAML versus YML. They work the same, but when you start sharing with other people, you're probably going to see YML a lot. So you need to know that it's the same thing, just with a slightly different extension. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.